everyone, this is Miss Maneely, and I'm creating a tutorial to show you how to create some different graphic displays in Excel that can be used for your project. I'm going to start with part 3 of your project, where you're asked to compare and contrast 2 or more subgroups for one of your quantitative variables. You're asked to select one of your quantitative variables and then separate the responses for that variable into 2 or 3 subgroups using responses from one other question you surveyed. And then you're asked to create appropriate parallel graphs to compare each subgroup. And then to calculate appropriate statistics for each subgroup, and then to write a clear, complete contextual comparison of your groups. So in this case, this would be an example of when you would want to do either parallel box and whisker plots, or perhaps 2 histograms that are scaled the same way, and then compare the distributions. When it's talking about appropriate statistics, you're looking at calculating the center, the spread, and describing the shape of the distribution. So I'm going to start by going in Excel, and essentially what I've done, actually let me put this back in order, is I've used data from, I think we collected it the first day of school, where I asked everybody to create a table using some variables of interest that we had. And so in this particular class, we labeled gender, the number of AP classes taken. Actually, let me delete this. I was busy doing something. Favorite type of food, the number of siblings, and the number of pets. And so I just generated an Excel document, an Excel spreadsheet with all that information. And so to complete part 1 of the project, or actually considering part 3, where I'm going to take a look at one quantitative variable, and then I want to basically separate it over different subgroups. So what I thought would be interesting is to look at the number of AP classes and see if there's an association between gender and the number of AP classes. And so I'm going to construct 2 histograms to do that. Now, unfortunately, with Excel, creating a histogram is not very easy. If you look at the insert menu at the different graphical displays that are available, the bars all represent bar graphs, not histograms. So Excel doesn't automatically create histograms for you. The nice thing is you can actually still create a histogram, but there are some add-ins that you have to add to your program. So what you need to do is go into File, go down to where it says Options, and then if you locate the Add-ins menu, you're going to want to select that. And then if you scroll down to where it says Manage Your Add-ins, you're going to go to Go. And what we want to do is select the Analysis Tool Pack and then press OK. When we do that, if you go to your Data menu now, you should see a Data Analysis window, or a Data Analysis menu. If you click on that, you'll notice that one of the options is a histogram. And you can actually calculate or construct a histogram using Excel. It's not one of the built-in graphs that it does automatically. It's something that you have to add on. So like I said, I basically want to compare the number of AP classes over gender. I basically want to separate and look at if the distribution is similar or not. So in order to do that, to make this a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort my data. When I sort my data, I want to keep all of the individual observations kind of consistent. I don't want to change just one column. I want to make sure that all columns follow suit. So what I'm going to do is I am going to sort my data by male and female. And then as a second category, I want to sort it by the number of AP classes. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight all of my columns. And if I go to Data, you'll notice that there's a Sort button right here, and you're going to click it. So the first thing I want to sort by is, in this case, gender. So I'm going to actually be sorting according to the categorical variable because I'm separating my graphs by gender. I also would like to organize or sort my AP data as well. So I'm going to add a level. So first it's going to sort by gender, and then it's going to sort by the number of AP classes. When I hit OK, all of the individual information for each student is still saved in the same order. But now you'll see for gender, I've got all my females listed first and then all my males listed second. You can also see if I look under the column for AP classes, now they're listed in order for females and in order for males. If I'm going to create a histogram, I have to let Excel know how many different intervals I'm going to have. And if I look at the number of AP classes, I can see that the lowest number of AP classes is 1 and the highest is 5. So Excel calls these bins. And so what I'm going to actually do is insert, and I'm just right clicking on my next column and inserting a column in between. And I'm just going to call this bin. Okay, and that's basically how many intervals I'm going to be using. And so I want there to be intervals 1 through 5 because I have students that are taking 1 AP course, 2 AP courses, 3, 4, and 5. So these are going to be the values on my x-axis. And what Excel will do is it'll calculate the frequency of 1s, the frequency of 2s, the frequency of 3s and 4s and 5s for the females. And I'm going to do it again for the males. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of move my cursor somewhere else in my document, and I'm going to go ahead, make sure I'm in the Data menu, and I'm going to click on Data Analysis. And it should be there now because we've added it in. Now I'm going to click on Histogram and hit OK. Well, Excel needs to know where the data is coming from. Well, the information that I'm interested in has to do with the number of AP classes for women or for females in the class. So I'm just going to click and drag just for the females the number of AP classes that they're taking. So I'm just clicking and dragging, dragging just until I get to here because that's the last female in my class. And then it asks for the bin range. So I need to let the computer know what I want my x-axis to look like. And so I'm going to click in that bin range field, and then I'm going to go over to where I've indicated the bins I'm using, 1 through 5. I'm going to let the I need to let Excel know that I want it to create a chart for me. Otherwise, it'll just do a frequency table, which isn't going to really help me. It's going to say chart output, and then I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice that I'm no longer in my data sheet. If you look at the bottom of your Excel document, my original data is still in sheet 1, but it's essentially created a new sheet for me with my data for the females in my class and the number of AP classes that they take. So the graph doesn't really tell me a lot. So you will need to go in and you're going to need to adjust the title of the axis or the title of the graph and the title of the axes. I'm going to go ahead and just delete the word frequency because I don't really need that. So my bin, this is basically the number of AP classes. Oops. And if I hit enter, it'll change that axis label for me. The frequency is fine. My title, though, I'm actually going to call this females and AP classes. Okay. Or actually, maybe I'll call it number of AP classes for females in the class. I think that might be a little bit better. Number of classes for females. Okay. The other thing about a histogram is that we're not supposed to have a gap between each of the bars, and so we need to adjust that. So if you right-click in the chart area, actually, if you go to Format, I think this might be an easier way. If you go to Format, you'll notice up here at the left, you'll see a place where it actually says Chart Area. Click on that and scroll down to where it says Series Frequency. And let's see, go to where it says Format Selection, I believe. There we go. If we go to Format Selection, you'll notice that it says in the middle of the page, it says something about a gap. So notice that there's a gap between each of these bars. In a true histogram, there is no gap. So what I'm going to want to do is actually just move the slider so it shows that there's no gap. The only problem is that the colors of my the default settings for Excel make it really difficult to tell the difference between my bars. So what I'm going to do is actually click on the bars, and they should all click at the same time. And where it says fill, I'm actually going to say no fill. And so, whoops, I'm also going to, I guess, have to adjust my border color. So let's do solid line, and let's make sure that we're using black there. It's still not working. So fill, Maybe we do a solid fill and we make it gray instead. Maybe that'll work a little bit better. It's still not working. Border color. Oh, I have it set at transparency. Let's not make it transparent. There we go. Okay, and so hopefully that works, and we don't actually need a border. Okay, and so there is your histogram for the number of AP classes for females. I'm going to do it one more time for the males too, just so you can get another example. So I'm going to go back to sheet 1 because that's where all my data is. And actually what you can do at this point is right click and select copy, and then if you want to you can paste it into a Word document. So if you open up a Word document, what I would recommend when you go into paste, go to paste special and paste it as a picture or a JPEG. And that way, if you adjust anything in your document, in your Excel document, it's not going to keep adjusting your graph, because if you just paste it in your document, any changes you make to your spreadsheet can sometimes adjust the images in your Word document, which can be kind of frustrating. So if we go back to our Excel document, I'm going to show you again. Let's go to sheet 1, and this time, let me get this out of the way. This time I want to create a histogram for my males taking AP classes. So again, I'm going to go to Data. I'm going to select Data Analysis. I'm going to choose the histogram option and press OK. It wants to know my input range, so let me delete that. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and select all of my AP class data for the males. And then my bin range actually isn't changing, so I'm not going to delete that. But it does ask me to create a chart output, and I'm going to select OK. And so notice that it created another sheet, sheet 7. So sheet 6 had all the data for my females. Sheet 7 now is the data for my males. So I want to kind of set it up the same way that I did for my females. So I'm going to call the new graph AP classes for males. I'll press enter, and I think maybe I even had a little, yeah, I used a pound sign here. Sorry, my OCD sort of gets the best of me sometimes. And then the axis I want to use is number of AP classes. Oops. Okay, we're going to go ahead and delete the frequency. We don't need that key. And then the only other thing we really need to do is adjust again the scale on the x-axis so that there isn't a gap between the bars. So if we go to Format, to Chart Area, and select Series Frequency, and then Format Selection, I'm going to change my gap to none. When it asks about the fill color, again, I'm going to actually make it a solid fill, but I'm going to make it really light. The border color, I'm going to use a solid line. Make sure it's dark, and notice again here for some reason it's set to transparent, so I'm just going to move it a little bit further so it's not transparent. And if I click in my graph, I should be able to see the bars now. I'm going to hit close. Might actually make this a little bit bigger, and then if I right click, I can copy, and then I can paste it into my document. But again, when you paste it into your document, I recommend pasting special and doing it as a picture. And again, that's because it enables you to, it won't change your graph every time you adjust your spreadsheet. So at this point, what I would want to do is compare now the two graphs. So for example, if I'm looking at the histograms, I don't have a lot of different categories, but my paragraph is going to include something about like the typical number of AP classes for males versus the typical number of AP classes for females. In my female case, for example, I'm probably going to use the mean, and just to be consistent, I'm going to go ahead and use the mean number of AP classes for the males in my class as well. So that's something that you can calculate on your calculator. And then if we're going to use the mean as our measure of center, we'd also want to compare the standard deviation for both groups. And then you can determine, you know, are females taking more AP classes, or are male students taking more AP classes? You can also kind of stretch and drag the graph so that they're a little bit more I can actually, just so that you can see it, I can put a border around my female data as well. And so if I want it to be the same exact size, I can kind of click and drag. And so now I think you can see that everything is lined up pretty nicely. And it does look as though male students tend to be taking more AP classes than females. One of the other things that I'm noticing as I'm comparing these two graphs is that my y-axis is not the same scale. So what I actually might do, notice with the females it goes from 0 to 3.5, whereas males it goes from 0 to 5. I think I'm actually going to redo my female axis so that it's consistent with the male, so it's a little bit easier to compare. So if I go back to my spreadsheet, my female data was all on sheet 6. And if I just click the axis or right click on it, it'll say format axis. You can either do it there or you can actually go to, I think layout has it. And if you look at the layout, I believe axes, and I want to look at my vertical axis. I can also, well, maybe that's not where I scale it. All right, well, let's just right click here on the axis. And so what I want to do is have it go from 0. So notice how it's all set to auto. If I set it to fixed, I want to fix the maximum at 5, and then I want to fix the major unit at 1, and the minor unit I don't really even need to worry about, but I can do 0.5. And now my axes will be consistent. So if I right click on this graph, I can hit copy. I can go back into my document. This time I'm going to delete that and go to paste special picture, and there's my female data. I'm going to go ahead and put a border around it. And so now both of the axes are scaled the same. And so that would definitely be something you'd want to pay attention to when you're comparing the two distributions. And so again, in your paragraph, you'd want to, sorry, I can't type very well. You'd want to compare the means of the two distributions and the standard deviations. You'd also want to comment on the shape of the distributions. You probably want to do that first. Okay, and then keep it in the context of the problem, and then some of the conclusions are going to have to do with whether or not males take more AP classes than females, or vice versa. So that's how you would do the graphs for that first exercise. I'll create another tutorial for creating graphs for the other exercises, but this is for the first one.